Originally, when I was preparing for this webinar, the most recent ones were on the 14th of June, so exactly a month ago today. And interestingly, these figures, which you'll see here, the 750 million, which has been paid out by insurers to date, the 37,000 claims that have been accepted by insurers, and the 16,000 or so that have been settled and paid on a full and final basis. Those figures haven't changed very much at all since June. So in a month, there's only been another 30 claims that have been settled on a full and final basis. In terms of where we are now procedurally, 6 months on from the Supreme Court decision, my view that there's still a considerable number of policyholders who've either not made claims or whose claims are yet to be accepted. I've had many inquiries where individual policyholders have been told they don't have a claim, or their insurance brokers told them they don't have a claim, and we've looked at the policy and actually there's potentially cover there. So my view is that this is it's just the beginning of the whole process. 6 months in the scale of litigation, which can often go on for years, it's just the beginning, really. So in terms of the numbers, as I've said there, there's 370,000 policyholders who are potentially impacted by this decision, 16,000 claims paid in full and final. What of the remaining 330,000 policyholders? What is the position with their claims?
Or does it mean that actually SARS was the 2003 outbreak in Asia, and it doesn't include COVID? And there are quite a few arguments which actually, certainly my view on those cases is that actually they've got prospects, because if you were to, for example, define SARS as only meaning the 2003 outbreak in Asia, the problem is that happened. It happened in a particular way, and it's not going to happen again in that way. So they must have, by definition, been referring to something slightly wider. So the question for us is, well, actually, what is that slightly wider thing? So we've been looking at, for example, getting expert evidence from somebody who's an epidemiologist or virologist who can tell us, well, what does SARS mean? What does it include? Are all the various mutations of COVID-19 also SARS? Is COVID-19 SARS, etc.? So I think those ones have got prospects based on expert evidence. There's also this other type of wording of those same lists. So you do actually have these static lists where they're sort of almost sandwiched between slightly odd wording. Because in the Rockcliffe case, actually, what they had as the list was simply a list that followed the words specified disease, means, and then they copied the list out.
Even what the event is has an impact, because some policies can refer to, for example, not being able to access offices, and then you have to think about whether it's the access to the office that stopped profit coming in, or it's the wider COVID impact. But putting those things aside, most policies will actually say, and or in practice, that the best thing is to look at revenue as a starting point in the period impacted compared to the same period in the prior year. And we'll come on to the kind of complicating factors, but for most businesses, in particular at the smaller end of the scale, looking at what they did in the same months of the previous year is A, probably what it may say in the policy, but B, the best way of working out what their revenue would have been. Now, once you've looked at the revenue that's been lost, you then need to take account of the costs. Now, gross profit is normally quite easy to work out as a percentage, because effectively it's the cost of sales that the business would have incurred in making those sales, and those are often, if you've got a restaurant, it's things like food, etc. That you've saved those costs. Where things get slightly more complicated is where you're talking about the more general cost of the business. Because often, what you'll be looking at is the extent to which the business has costs which a variable, and therefore that they may have saved, whereas fixed costs will be incurred regardless. So it's often necessary to, split out those costs and try and work out which ones effectively have been saved and which ones have still been incurred. Where with BI claims on COVID, it's much more complicated than normal BI claims, is because of the FCA and other guidance around grants, etc.